Well, folks, here again for the weekly forecast. Of course, as most people have kind of come to realize, we are looking at a very hot period coming up over this next 7-day period. During this last week, we've been seeing a mixed mode. We had a couple cold fronts move through the state that did touch off some scattered thunderstorm activity. The most concentrated areas of precipitation were right along the Missouri River Basin, basically from just north of Omaha down to essentially the southeastern corner, and then right along the Kansas-Nebraska border. Several waves moved most of the heavy precipitation just to our south through Kansas. As we've gone through to the end of the week, of course, we've been dealing with a little bit more an increase of scattered convection, and we'll probably deal with that through the remainder of this weekend before the furnace, or blast furnace, I should say, turns up in earnest and we start to deal with a return to upper 90s to most likely low 100s. The big question is, how long will it last? And will we receive any precipitation during this impending heat wave? So let's get right to the models and see what's going on. First of all, we do have a ridge to the southwest. This is our maker of our weather as we go through next week. But on the top of this ridge, we do see a slight northwest flow, so we have one piece of energy moving through the state right now. We expect to see some scattered thunderstorm activity, particularly over the eastern half of the state. Anything that gets developed is likely to reach severe limits in some of the isolated locations. And then as we go into tomorrow, what we end up noticing is that ridge kind of pushes a little bit farther to the north, and we see another piece of energy moving along the periphery of that ridge. So the best locations for precipitation as we go into tomorrow will be the northern half of the state and then extreme eastern Nebraska as we get a little bit of that moisture from the Gulf moving up into the region. Now as we go into Monday, we start to see that ridge pushing more toward our north and our east, takes most of the active weather up over the Great Lakes region, and we start to see subsiding air into our region indicated by the blues here, and we'll start to crank the heat up. So we'll see temperatures jumping up into the low mid-90s as we get into Monday, but more importantly as we get into Tuesday, we start to see this ridge taking over the central plains. There is one piece of energy that's noted by the models that potentially could come out Tuesday afternoon and impact western Nebraska. If it does, we'd see some elevated convection and some severe weather, but overall we'd be looking at a widespread upper 90s to low 100s, and in fact the best areas for 100-degree weather will be the western half of the state. And as we go into Wednesday, we may actually see some areas of the state touching that 105 to 107 range, particularly as we get into north central Nebraska. Ridge dominates, most of the energy stays up into the Dakotas and then rises around the front ridge and might come down into the eastern Corn Belt. But overall we're looking at a second consecutive day of very hot conditions with some very high dew points. So the cattle stress could get really outrageous on Wednesday. Now as we go into Thursday, we do see some trends in the models indicating that potentially this ridge will start to break down slightly, but we are still going to be looking at upper 90s to low 100s. And as we get into Friday, now the ridge starts to flatten and we start to see some of that energy moving into the Rocky Mountains, so we may see some scattered thunderstorms develop late in the period, and particularly as we get into next weekend, we may actually see some more scattered convection. The 8 to 14-day forecast indicates the heat will stay in place basically from next Thursday to the following Tuesday. There is some questions concerning the precipitation, but right now the consensus of the models is drier than normal conditions. The western half of the state has the best opportunity for precipitation.